Right now, Mike Lange told me one day in Toronto, this was back in 2001, I feel like a turkey trying to hide out on Thanksgiving Day. This was on the eve of his being honored with the Foster Hewitt Memorial Award given for outstanding work as an NHL broadcaster, as well as permanent placement within the Hockey Hall of Fame. He was humbled, and in the truest sense of the term, he couldn't even process what was about to be bestowed upon him. A little later, he had to try his jacket on, the one he'd get to wear forever, in the figurative sense. It's a very special moment, isn't it? He'd say in looking up my way once the shoulders were unruffled. Obviously, I'll cherish this for the rest of my life. Yeah, we know the feeling. Today, upon the passing of this legitimate Pittsburgh legend, those of us who grew up with his play-by-play, his personality, his passion, never forget this part, his unparalleled brilliance at being able to bring you the action on radio at a level that'd have you comfortable turning off the TV to attain a better feel. We'll have all that to cherish. Mr. Lange passed away Wednesday night at the age of 76. And it's not that he'll be missed so much as he already was, because he belonged at the microphone, and even more because it still doesn't feel like there should be a world with Pittsburgh's beloved hockey franchise, but without that iconic, eclectic voice. It's not the catchphrases, although they were fun and he loved them, and as noted earlier, he'd find himself crafting them all the time. Never reduce his achievements, his impact, to the catchphrases. It's about the action. It's about the moment, and then the next moment, and then the next, because in the world's fastest team sport, the real talent's not just being able to keep up, it's about being ahead. Those of us who grew up with Mr. Lange's work, back when only a handful of the Penguins games were televised, back before Mario Lemieux, back when Mr. Lange himself was the team's star, can agree, I'll bet, that no one was better at feeling the event, the momentum, and in turn being able to parlay that into what would come next. You can almost hear him. Watch out here. Here come the Flyers now. You just have a sense here that if, and my personal favorite, reminding all of us of the perils of anyone from the Penguins daring to skate or pass in front of their own net once the goaltender's been pulled. Every single time. No one was at Mr. Lange's level in this regard. Not that I've ever heard. Not in Pittsburgh, not anywhere. Hockey coursed through his veins. He'd prepare all day, all the way into his latter days when he was visibly far too ill to have been working. He'd take notes at the morning skate and invariably bring up maybe one small observation in the main broadcast that night about how so-and-so was really flying that day. He'd show up hours before the actual face-off, taking more notes and more notes and more notes in the media lounge, alone at his own table, and locked in as if he were preparing to coach. That's how a call like the one in Game 1 of the 1992 final could occur. That was the one where Lemieux would score in the final seconds, burying that rebound past Ed Belfour to win it. And Mr. Lange, in going through this whole sequence, would go rapid fire, delivering each detail, and then delivering that masterful, magical pause before saying, "Hey, shoots and scores." Right then and there, he was one of us. He saw it, he couldn't believe it, and once he fully absorbed it, he let it all out. He was our voice. My God, that's missed. As people who love hockey here, that's the soundtrack of our lives. He'll be missed too. Mr. Lange was a giving, generous soul. He understood who he was and what he meant to so many, but he'd apply that not for himself, but for others. There'll be a billion stories like this over the next little while, but I'm going to add mine to the pile. When I began on the Penguins beat for the Post-Gazette in 1997, he was helpful and supporting. When I drove to Toronto to cover his Hall induction for that paper, he responded later with a full-page handwritten letter thanking me. When he'd see me in Winnipeg, a place that he didn't exactly like the way I like it, he'd mutter all kinds of unprintables in my direction to the amusement of everybody around us. When we were walking out of Nashville on that historic summer night in 2017, he first asked me how I felt I'd done in writing my column, as if I somehow mattered by comparison. And in turn, when I asked how he felt he did with the call of Patrick Hornqvist's goal, he answered, "I'll do better with next year's." Good man, loyal man, Pittsburgh man. Could have had any job at any level of hockey anywhere across North America. Stayed right here, which was our gift. I could condense all this to my early childhood when I'd sneak a dictionary-sized transistor radio under my pillow to keep up with Mr. Lange in Los Angeles or Vancouver and smile like an infant when he'd welcome me, and me alone, by the way, at least in my head, to the Night Owl Club once the clock struck midnight in Pittsburgh. I could condense all this to Mr. Lange on that amazing night in 1991 at the old Greater Pittsburgh International Airport, literally sticking his head out of the back of that school bus that was carrying the team after the overnight flight from Minneapolis, surrounded by tens of thousands of us who'd clogged up the Parkway West in the wrong direction at around 3 a.m. The man had his head out of the window, one of those small rectangular windows. I could condense all of this to a call, or a catchphrase, or an interaction I'd observed with a fan who was far more starstruck at meeting him than any athlete. I'm not going to do that. There's no Penguins if not for Mr. Lange. I've been convinced of that forever, and I shared that with the man himself. Listen, bless Jean Pronovost and Pierre LaRouche and Rick Kehoe, but they weren't about to preserve what we enjoy now. They weren't the most identifiable figures of this franchise. They weren't what lent it immediate credibility in a place where, if we're all being honest about the past, the bulk of the older generation treated hockey here the same way that we would treat an indoor lacrosse team right about now. Mr. Lange was elite, and it would take no more than a minute of his broadcast to sense that. As such, the product was real too. Mr. Lange got the Penguins to 1984 when a tall, lanky teen from Laval, Quebec, showed up, and the two of them, plus Sidney Crosby, Evgeny Malkin, and so many more, took us through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Stanley Cup celebrations. All 5, with one man emceeing those events, with one man at the mic. A part of all of us has left the building.